A new beginning. Alice stepped off the bus, her heart pounding in her chest, as she took in the imposing facade of the elite school that loomed before her. The building was a grand structure with tall columns and pristine white walls that seemed to shine under the bright sun. She squinted against the light, feeling a mix of excitement and dread wash over her. This was supposed to be a new beginning, a chance to prove herself. But as she glanced at the students milling about, laughing and chatting, the weight of her difference pressed heavily on her shoulders. "Wow, look at that," she muttered to herself, watching a group of girls in designer clothes, their hair perfectly styled, their laughter ringing like music. They looked so confident, so at ease in this world of privilege. Alice tucked a loose curl behind her ear, her fingers brushing against the textured fabric of her favorite hoodie, a stark contrast to the sleek outfits surrounding her. As she walked through the gates, she felt the stares of her peers, some curious, some judgmental. She tried to ignore them, focusing on the path ahead, but the whispers floated through the air like haunting echoes. "Who's that?" "Is she new?" "Look at her hair." The words felt like daggers, each one cutting deeper than the last. Alice swallowed hard, reminding herself that she was strong. She was not here to impress anyone. She was here to learn, to grow, to shine. In the days that followed, the school's environment proved to be as harsh as she feared. Alice was enrolled in advanced classes, and while the academic pressure was intense, it was the social atmosphere that weighed heavily on her spirit. Her classmates often excluded her from conversations, their eyes lingering on her skin tone and her hair. They whispered behind her back, their laughter ringing in her ears like a cruel melody. Among the faculty, one teacher stood out for her notorious reputation. Ms. Harrington, infamous for her strictness and blatant favoritism, she seemed to take particular pleasure in belittling students who did not fit her mold of perfection. The day Alice found herself in Ms. Harrington's English class was the day her life would change forever. "All right, class," Ms. Harrington announced with an icy tone. "Today we will be discussing the theme of identity in literature. I expect everyone to participate actively." As she spoke, her eyes scanned the room, her gaze landing on Alice, who sat quietly in the back, trying to make herself as small as possible. "Let's start with you, Alice," Ms. Harrington said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Why don't you tell us about how you identify? I mean, you clearly have a unique perspective." Alice's heart sank. The weight of her classmates' eyes bore down on her as they stifled laughter. "I don't know," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. Not surprised, Ms. Harrington shot back, her lips curling into a smirk. "Perhaps you should spend more time thinking about who you are instead of hiding in the back of the class. Maybe that way you won't feel so lost." The room erupted into laughter, and Alice's cheeks burned with humiliation. She felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, but she fought them back, determined not to let Ms. Harrington see her weakness. That evening, Alice returned home, her heart heavy with the weight of the day. As she walked through the door, she was greeted by her mother, Principal Williams, who wore her signature warm smile. "How was your day, sweetheart?" she asked, her voice full of concern. Alice forced a smile, not wanting to burden her mother with her troubles. "It was fine, just the usual," she replied, avoiding her mother's piercing gaze. "Just the usual, huh?" her mother said, arching an eyebrow. "You know you can talk to me about anything, right? I want you to feel safe at school." Alice nodded, but the words stuck in her throat. How could she tell her mother, the principal of the very school that was making her life miserable, about the way Ms. Harrington treated her? As days turned into weeks, Alice's encounters with Ms. Harrington only grew more humiliating. The teacher seemed to relish in her torment, singling her out in class, making snide remarks about her appearance and her quiet demeanor. "You really should speak up more, Alice," Ms. Harrington would say, her voice dripping with condescension. "Or perhaps you just don't have anything valuable to contribute." Each insult felt like a wound, and Alice struggled to hold on to her sense of self. She was a smart girl, passionate about literature and writing, Yet the constant ridicule made her question her worth. One day, after a particularly cruel episode in class where Miss Harrington publicly compared her to a lost puppy, Alice sat in the bathroom, her hands shaking as she fought back tears. "Why am I even here?" she whispered to herself, staring at her reflection. "Why can't I just be like everyone else?" In that moment of despair, Alice caught sight of a message scrawled on the bathroom stall. "Your difference is your strength. Embrace it." The words struck a chord within her, sparking a flicker of hope amidst the darkness. Alice took a deep breath, steeling herself against the onslaught of negativity that surrounded her. She realized she had a choice. She could either let Miss Harrington's words define her or rise above them. She decided it was time to talk to her mother. The following day after school, Alice walked into her mother's office. "Mom, can we talk?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Of course, honey. What's on your mind?" Principal Williams looked up from her paperwork, her eyes filled with concern. "It's about Miss Harrington," Alice began, her heart racing. She's been really mean to me. In class, she makes fun of me. And it's not just me. She does it to other kids too." Principal Williams's expression shifted to one of disbelief. "What? I had no idea, Alice. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I was scared," Alice admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "I didn't want you to think I couldn't handle it. I thought maybe it was just me being too sensitive." "Alice, you are not too sensitive. No one deserves to be treated that way, especially not by a teacher," Principal Williams said firmly, her voice resolute. "I promise you, we will address this. You have every right to feel safe and respected at school." As they spoke, a sense of relief washed over Alice. It felt empowering to share her pain, to know that her mother believed her. But deep down, Alice also felt apprehension. What would happen when Miss Harrington found out that she had spoken up? Would the bullying intensify? That night, Alice lay in bed, her mind racing with thoughts. She had a secret weapon, the truth about her identity as the principal's daughter, but she wasn't sure if she wanted to use it. Would revealing her connection to her mother change how Miss Harrington treated her, or would it only provoke more hostility? The next day, as Alice braced herself for the inevitable confrontation, she felt a mixture of dread and determination. She was tired of being silent, tired of being the target of Miss Harrington's cruelty. The bell rang, signaling the start of class, and Alice took a deep breath, steeling herself for whatever would come. As she entered the classroom, Miss Harrington's eyes narrowed. "Ah, Alice," she said, a mocking smile playing on her lips. "Back for more. I hope you've come prepared to contribute today." "I have something to say," Alice replied, her voice steady, surprising even herself with the confidence that bubbled within her. "Go ahead. We're all ears," Miss Harrington retorted, crossing her arms as she leaned against her desk. "I've spoken to my mother about the way you treat me and other students. She's the principal of this school," Alice said, her heart racing. "This isn't just about me anymore. It's about respect." The classroom fell silent, a shocked stillness enveloping the room. The snickers that usually erupted at Alice's expense were replaced by gasps of surprise. Miss Harrington's expression shifted from amusement to disbelief. "You're the principal's daughter," she stammered, clearly caught off guard. "Yes, and I won't stand for your behavior any longer," Alice said, feeling the surge of empowerment. "I deserve to be treated with respect, just like everyone else in this class, and I'm not afraid to stand up for myself." As the tension in the room thickened, Alice realized that her voice mattered. She had the power to change her narrative, to reclaim her story. The look on Miss Harrington's face was priceless, a blend of anger and confusion, and for the first time, Alice felt a spark of hope. But this was just the beginning. Little did she know, the consequences of her confrontation would ripple through the school, challenging not only Miss Harrington's authority, but also Alice's strength as she navigated the storm that was about to unfold. The fallout. The days that followed Alice's bold declaration felt surreal. The classroom dynamic shifted dramatically. Students who had previously ignored or ridiculed her now approached her with tentative smiles and nods of encouragement. Whispers of admiration replaced the judgmental stares, and for the first time, Alice felt a flicker of belonging. Yet, with the newfound respect came a palpable tension in the air, especially from Miss Harrington. As Alice entered the classroom that Monday morning, she sensed a change in the atmosphere. The air was thick with anticipation, a mix of excitement and anxiety among her peers. They were no longer merely passive observers. They had witnessed Alice's courage and now viewed her through a different lens. Their eyes sparkled with a mix of curiosity and admiration. "Hey, Alice," one girl named Mia, who had previously kept her distance, said as she took a seat beside her. "I thought what you did was really brave." Miss Harrington needed to be called out. "Thanks," Alice replied, surprised by the warmth in Mia's voice. "I just couldn't take it anymore. It's not fair." Mia nodded, her expression earnest. "Yeah, it's not just you. I've seen her do that to other kids too. Maybe we should all speak up." Alice felt a swell of gratitude. The sense of camaraderie was intoxicating, yet a small voice in her head reminded her of the potential fallout. What would Miss Harrington do in response to this uprising? Would she retaliate? As the bell rang, Miss Harrington strode into the room, her posture rigid and her gaze sharp. The previous confidence she exuded had shifted into something darker, an undercurrent of hostility that sent a shiver down Alice's spine. Well, look who decided to show up today," she said, her voice icy as she surveyed the classroom. "I hope everyone has learned a lesson in civility since last week." A murmur of discomfort rippled through the students, and Alice could feel the tension mounting. Miss Harrington's words felt like a threat cloaked in sarcasm, aimed not just at Alice but at the entire class. It was a clear reminder of the power she wielded and the retribution that could follow. "Today we'll begin with a group project," Miss Harrington continued, her eyes narrowing at Alice. "You will be working in teams, and I expect nothing but excellence. Let's see if any of you can live up to that expectation." The class was assigned to form groups, and the buzz of excitement quickly turned to uncertainty as students glanced at one another, trying to navigate the murky waters of social dynamics. Alice felt a knot tighten in her stomach. Would she be assigned to a group that would ostracize her, or would they rally around her newfound status? "Why don't you join us, Alice?" Mia suggested, gesturing to her group, which included a few other classmates who had previously kept their distance. "We could use your insights. You're really good at analyzing themes." Alice's heart lifted at the invitation. "Sure, I'd love to," she replied, feeling a surge of hope. As she settled into the group, she realized that perhaps she could find allies in this sea of uncertainty. As they began discussing their project, Alice found her voice more easily than she ever had before. She contributed ideas, spoke passionately about the themes they were exploring, and the other girls nodded in agreement. It felt liberating to be part of a group that valued her thoughts. For the first time, she felt like she belonged. However, the moment was short-lived. As Alice was engaged in the discussion, she noticed Miss Harrington watching from the front of the room, her eyes fixed intently on Alice. There was a coldness in her gaze that sent a shiver down Alice's spine. The teacher seemed to revel in Alice's discomfort, relishing the power she held over the students. When the project presentations began, Alice's group was one of the first to share their findings. Alice spoke with confidence, her voice steady as she articulated their analysis of identity in the chosen literature. She felt a rush of adrenaline as she concluded her presentation with a powerful quote about self-acceptance, the very lesson she had been grappling with in her own life. The class erupted in applause, but Miss Harrington's reaction was anything but warm. "That was adequate, I suppose," she said dismissively, her tone dripping with disdain. "But let's see if you can back that up with real understanding, Alice. Why don't you tell us what you think the author intended with that quote?" Alice's heart raced. She had prepared for this moment, but Miss Harrington's cold scrutiny made her feel exposed. I believe the author wanted to convey the importance of embracing one's identity, even in the face of adversity, she replied, her voice quivering slightly. Adversity. Ms. Harrington raised an eyebrow, a smirk playing on her lips. Is that really what you're experiencing here? Or are you just exaggerating? I can assure you that many of your classmates are dealing with much tougher challenges. Alice felt the blood drain from her face. Her classmates shifted uncomfortably, their expressions a mix of sympathy and discomfort. It was clear that Ms. Harrington was using this moment to assert her authority, to belittle Alice publicly. After the presentation, Alice returned to her seat, her head swimming with a mix of emotions. It felt as if Ms. Harrington had just ripped away the layers of support she had built around herself. The warm camaraderie with her peers felt distant now, overshadowed by the teacher's cruel dismissal. As the class ended, Alice gathered her things slowly, unsure of how to process the day. She wanted to tell her mother about the incident, but a part of her hesitated. Would it seem like she was seeking special treatment just because she was the principal's daughter? Would her mother think she was weak for needing to rely on her position? That evening, Alice sat in her room, grappling with the weight of her thoughts. Her mother entered, a concerned expression on her face. I noticed you seemed a bit down today. Is everything okay at school? Alice hesitated, torn between wanting to confide in her mother and the fear of being seen as a complainer. It's just Ms. Harrington, she finally said, her voice barely a whisper. She doesn't seem to like me, and she keeps making comments that feel unfair. I thought things would get better after I spoke up. Principal Williams sat down beside her, her demeanor shifting from concern to resolute. Alice, I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. No one should be treated that way, and I want to make sure this stops. We can talk to the school board if we need to. Alice's heart raced at the thought of escalating the situation. I don't want to cause any more trouble, Mom. What if it makes things worse? I understand your concern, but your well-being is what matters most, her mother replied gently. You should never have to endure disrespect. It's time we put an end to Ms. Harrington's behavior. As the conversation unfolded, Alice felt a sense of comfort in her mother's unwavering support. It was reassuring to know she wasn't alone in this fight. Yet, deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that confronting Ms. Harrington might lead to unforeseen consequences. The following week, Alice walked into class with a mix of apprehension and determination. She was prepared to face Ms. Harrington head-on. However, what she didn't anticipate was the extent of the teacher's retaliation. As the students settled in, Ms. Harrington stood at the front of the room, a dark cloud hanging over her. Let's review the guidelines for your projects, she announced, her eyes narrowing at Alice. Those who fail to meet my expectations will be penalized, and we'll see just how well you understand the material. The classroom erupted into a flurry of whispers, and Alice felt her stomach churn. She glanced at Mia, who gave her an encouraging nod, but the fear gnawing at her insides was undeniable. Ms. Harrington's tone was laced with a thinly veiled threat, and Alice knew she had to be careful. As the days turned into a tense routine, Alice couldn't shake the feeling that Ms. Harrington was watching her every move. The teacher found subtle ways to undermine her confidence, calling on her only to challenge her answers or making snide comments about her contributions. The group project that had once brought her joy now felt like a looming threat, and Alice found herself questioning her abilities. One afternoon, as Alice was packing her bag, Ms. Harrington approached her desk. Alice, may I have a word? She said, her voice deceptively calm. Alice's heart raced as she nodded, bracing herself for what was to come. Yes, Ms. Harrington. I'm concerned about your performance in class, Ms. Harrington said, her tone now laced with a chilling sweetness. I want you to succeed, but you need to put in more effort. I wouldn't want your mother to think I'm not doing my job. Alice felt a wave of nausea wash over her. I'm trying my best, she replied, her voice shaky. I suggest you try harder, Ms. Harrington said, her eyes gleaming with something sinister. Because if you don't, I'll have no choice but to recommend that you retake this class next semester. As Miss Harrington walked away, Alice felt a wave of hopelessness wash over her. The threat hung heavy in the air, and she, standing tall. The next few days were a blur of tension and anxiety for Alice. Each time she entered Miss Harrington's classroom, she could feel the weight of the teacher's scrutiny. It was as if the walls themselves were closing in around her, and every word she spoke was meticulously measured and weighed against an invisible scale of judgment. As the week wore on, Alice struggled to concentrate on her studies. The threat of failing the class loomed like a storm cloud over her head, casting a shadow over everything she had once enjoyed about learning. The whispers of her classmates, once filled with support, now seemed to fade into the background, replaced by the relentless voice of self-doubt. "Hey, Alice, are you coming to the study group tonight?" Maya asked one day after class, concern etching her brow as she noticed Alice's distracted demeanor. I don't think I can," Alice replied, forcing a smile. "I've got a lot of work to catch up on." Maya frowned, her eyes narrowing. "You know you don't have to do this alone, right? We're all here for you. You've got to talk to someone about what's happening." Alice appreciated Mia's concern, but the fear of making things worse kept her from fully opening up. Instead, she retreated to the sanctuary of her room, the familiar clutter of books and notebooks offering a semblance of comfort. She sat on her bed, staring at the ceiling, the silence deafening as she wrestled with her thoughts. What could she do? Should she continue to endure Miss Harrington's cruelty, or should she risk everything by escalating the situation? The conversation with her mother lingered in her mind, and she knew deep down that she had to make a choice. The following morning, fueled by a blend of determination and fear, Alice decided it was time to confront Miss Harrington again. The morning light filtered through her window, casting a warm glow that momentarily lifted her spirits. She dressed carefully, opting for a simple yet confident outfit that made her feel a bit stronger. She wanted to embody the strength she was still trying to find within herself. As she arrived at school, Alice took a deep breath, reminding herself of the words she had seen on the bathroom stall. "Your difference is your strength. Embrace it." With that mantra echoing in her mind, she made her way to Miss Harrington's classroom. When Alice stepped inside, she found the teacher at her desk, engrossed in grading papers. The atmosphere felt charged, and Alice could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. "Miss Harrington," Alice said, her voice steady despite the racing of her heart. Miss Harrington looked up, her expression unreadable. "Yes, Alice. What is it?" "I need to talk to you about the way you've been treating me in class," Alice said, summoning every ounce of courage. "It's not just me. I've heard other students express how uncomfortable they feel too. I think it's important we address this." Miss Harrington's eyes narrowed, and Alice braced herself for the impending backlash. "You think you can just waltz in here and dictate how I teach? Your mother may be the principal, but that doesn't mean you're immune from constructive criticism." Alice clenched her fists, the fire within her igniting. "I'm not asking for special treatment. I just want a respectful learning environment. You've made it clear that you don't think I'm capable, but I am. I deserve to be treated with dignity." For a moment, silence enveloped the room, thick and suffocating. Miss Harrington stared at Alice, her lips pressed into a thin line. "You're quite bold, Alice, but remember, boldness can lead to consequences. You might want to consider whether this is a battle worth fighting." "I'm not afraid of the consequences," Alice replied, her voice stronger than she felt. "I'm not going to let you intimidate me anymore. I'm here to learn, and I deserve to be treated with respect, just like everyone else." With that, Alice turned on her heel and walked out of the classroom, her heart pounding with a mix of exhilaration and fear. She had finally spoken her truth, but what would happen next? As the day progressed, Alice felt a strange sense of empowerment wash over her. She had taken a stand, and for the first time, it felt like she was reclaiming her identity. She attended her classes, her spirits lifted by the thought that she had finally addressed the source of her suffering. During lunch, Alice sat with Mia and a few other classmates who had begun to rally around her. They shared stories of their own experiences, revealing that Ms. Harrington had made snide remarks to several students, often targeting those who seemed different. "Honestly, I was so afraid to say anything," Mia confessed, her brow furrowed. "But seeing you stand up for yourself gave me courage. We should organize something, maybe a petition or a meeting with your mom." Alice felt a flicker of hope. The idea of standing together was powerful. "That could work," she replied, her enthusiasm growing. "If we all speak out, maybe Ms. Harrington will realize that her behavior isn't acceptable." As they discussed their options, Alice's heart swelled with gratitude. The support of her classmates provided a sense of community she had longed for since her arrival at the school. It was clear that they were all tired of the toxicity that had seeped into their classroom, and they were ready to take a stand. The following days were filled with energy as Alice and her classmates began gathering signatures for a petition. They spread the word discreetly, encouraging others to share their experiences with Ms. Harrington. As the numbers grew, so did the sense of solidarity. It was a powerful movement that transcended Alice's individual struggle, rallying students from different backgrounds to come together. But with each step forward, the fear of retaliation from Ms. Harrington loomed in the background. One afternoon, as Alice sat in the library with Mia, she overheard a conversation between a couple of girls who had been in Ms. Harrington's class. "Did you hear what happened to Samantha?" one girl whispered. "She stood up to Ms. Harrington last week, and now she's failing English. It's like she's punishing her for speaking out." Alice's stomach churned at the thought. "We need to be careful," she said, turning to Mia, who looked equally concerned. "What if we face consequences like that too?" "Don't let fear stop you, Alice," Maya replied, her voice firm. "If we back down now, it will only make things worse for everyone. We have to be brave." Alice nodded, but doubts lingered in her mind. Despite the growing momentum of their movement, she was acutely aware of the risk they were taking. How could they ensure that their voices were heard without facing severe repercussions? Determined to press on, Alice decided to meet with her mother that evening. She needed to share not only the developments of the petition, but also the rumors swirling around Samantha's experience. Sitting across from Principal Williams at the dining table, Alice took a deep breath. "Mom, we've gathered a lot of support from my classmates, and we're planning to meet with the school board to discuss the issues with Ms. Harrington. But I overheard something disturbing today. Samantha spoke out, and now she's failing her class. I'm worried that if we push too hard, we'll face the same kind of retaliation." Principal Williams's expression darkened, a mix of concern and determination flooding her features. "This is serious, Alice. I'll make sure we investigate any claims of unfair treatment. Your voice matters, and so does every student's right to a safe and respectful environment. But what if Ms. Harrington tries to retaliate? What if she makes life even more difficult for us?" Alice's voice trembled, revealing her fears. "We'll take every precaution," her mother reassured her. "If there are any repercussions, we will address them directly. You are not alone in this fight. I promise." Alice felt a wave of relief wash over her, the warmth of her mother's support wrapping around her like a comforting blanket. It was a reminder that she had allies in this battle, both at home and at school. The day of the meeting with the school board arrived, and Alice stood in front of the group alongside her classmates. The atmosphere was charged with a mix of fear and hope. They had all come together, united in their desire for change. As they entered the meeting room, the weight of their collective resolve pressed upon Alice's shoulders. The room was filled with faculty and board members, their expressions serious as they prepared to hear the students' concerns. Principal Williams stood by Alice's side, her presence a reassuring anchor. As each student took their turn to share their experiences, Alice felt her heart swell with pride. They spoke with passion and conviction, recounting the ways in which Ms. Harrington's behavior had impacted their learning and their sense of belonging. The courage displayed by her peers ignited a fire within Alice. She felt invincible standing there with them. Finally, it was Alice's turn. She stepped forward, her palms sweaty, but her heart steady. "I'm Alice Williams," she began, her voice strong despite the nervous flutter in her stomach. "I'm here not just as the principal's daughter, but as a student who deserves respect just like everyone else in this room. Ms. Harrington's treatment has affected not only my learning but also the learning of many others. We deserve an environment where we can thrive without fear of the power of unity." "I'm Alice Williams," she began, her voice resonating with a blend of nerves and determination. "I'm here not just as the principal's daughter, but as a student who deserves respect, just like everyone else in this room. Ms. Harrington's treatment has affected not only my learning but also the learning of many others. We deserve an environment where we can thrive without fear of humiliation." As Alice spoke, she locked eyes with the board members, seeking to convey the gravity of their situation. She could see the furrowed brows and tense expressions among the adults, a flicker of understanding passing through the room as they absorbed her words. Over the past few months, many students in our class have felt marginalized, singled out for reasons that have nothing to do with our abilities. Ms. Harrington has made it clear through her comments and actions that our differences are liabilities rather than strengths. Alice continued, her passion igniting. "This has created an environment of fear and anxiety, where many of us feel we cannot express ourselves or contribute fully." The room was silent, the air thick with tension as Alice's classmates nodded in agreement, their solidarity bolstering her courage. She glanced at Mia, who offered an encouraging smile, and that moment of connection fueled Alice's resolve. "We are here not just to voice our complaints, but to propose a solution. We want to foster an inclusive atmosphere where every student can feel valued and heard." As she finished her statement, a wave of applause erupted from her peers, echoing off the walls of the meeting room. The board members exchanged looks of surprise, clearly moved by the students' united front. It was a pivotal moment, one that solidified their mission to create lasting change. Principal Williams took a step forward, her presence commanding attention. "Thank you, Alice, and thank you to all the students who have spoken today. It takes great courage to stand up and share your experiences. I want to assure you that we take these concerns seriously. Our priority is to create a safe and supportive environment for every student, regardless of their background." The discussion that followed was a mix of testimonies and proposals for action. Board members took notes diligently, while some expressed their support for the students' initiative. "We need to investigate these claims thoroughly and ensure that faculty understand the importance of fostering a respectful learning environment," one member stated, looking directly at Principal Williams. As the meeting progressed, the mood shifted from one of apprehension to one of hope. The students had successfully highlighted the issues, and their collective voices reverberated throughout the room. Yet, as Alice sat there listening to the dialogue unfold, she couldn't shake the anxiety that gnawed at her insides. What would Ms. Harrington's response be? Would she retaliate, or would this lead to real change? When the meeting concluded, Alice and her classmates felt a mix of relief and uncertainty. They had spoken out, but now it was time to see how the school administration would act on their words. As they filed out of the room, Alice noticed the heavy silence surrounding them, a stark contrast to the energy they had felt moments before. "Do you think they'll actually do something?" Maya asked, her brows knitted in concern. "I hope so," Alice replied, her heart still racing. "But change takes time, and I'm worried about what might happen in the meantime." Days turned into weeks, and the atmosphere at school shifted subtly but noticeably. Ms. Harrington's demeanor became even colder, and her critiques of Alice's work intensified. Every assignment felt like a battleground, and each time Alice submitted her work, she braced herself for the inevitable harsh comments. One afternoon, as Alice sat at her desk reviewing her latest paper, she heard the familiar sound of Ms. Harrington's heels clicking on the floor. The teacher stopped in front of her, arms crossed tightly against her chest. "Alice, can we talk?" Alice felt a knot form in her stomach. "Sure," she replied, her voice steady despite her anxiety. "Your recent performance is concerning," Ms. Harrington began, her tone as sharp as ever. "You seem distracted, and it's affecting your grades. Are you sure you're focused on your studies?" Alice clenched her fists under her desk, holding back the words that threatened to spill out. "I am focused," she said, struggling to keep her composure. "I've been working hard." Miss Harrington leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that felt more menacing than confidential. "If you think your little petition will save you from criticism, you're sorely mistaken. I will not tolerate insubordination." Alice's heart raced, and she could feel her hands trembling. "I'm not trying to be insubordinate. I just want to learn." "You want to learn?" Ms. Harrington scoffed. "Then maybe you should stop focusing on your friends and their little cause and start concentrating on your education. You're playing a dangerous game, Alice, and it won't end well for you." With that, she turned sharply and strode away, leaving Alice feeling hollow. The threat hung in the air like a dark cloud, casting a shadow over her efforts. Would she really face consequences for standing up for herself and her classmates? After school, Alice confided in Mia and the others during their study group. "Ms. Harrington is doubling down," she said, frustration evident in her voice. "She made it clear that she's not going to let this go. I feel like I'm walking on eggshells." "You're not alone," Maya reassured her, glancing around at their classmates, who nodded in agreement. "We're all in this together. If she tries to bring you down, we'll all stand by you." Alice felt a flicker of hope igniting in her chest. The support of her friends meant the world to her, and she realized that this fight wasn't just hers. It was a collective struggle for respect and dignity. In the following weeks, the students continued to rally support. They organized discussions during lunch, encouraging others to share their experiences and concerns. Slowly but surely, a movement was gaining traction within the student body. They held assemblies where students spoke openly about their struggles, sharing stories of resilience that inspired many. Alice found herself stepping further into a leadership role, her voice echoing with conviction as she advocated for change. She had transformed from the quiet girl in the back of the class into a symbol of courage for her peers. Yet, despite her growing confidence, the fear of Miss Harrington's retaliation loomed large. One afternoon, after a particularly inspiring assembly, Alice felt a renewed sense of purpose. "We're making a difference," she said to her friends as they gathered in the school courtyard. "People are starting to listen. We can't back down now." But just as Alice's spirits were lifted, she noticed a familiar figure approaching, the stern-faced Miss Harrington. The teacher walked with a purpose, her eyes fixed on Alice, and for a moment, the world around them faded away. "Alice, may I have a word?" Miss Harrington said, her voice icy and commanding. Alice's heart sank, dread washing over her. "Sure," she managed to reply, trying to maintain her composure. As they stepped aside from the group, Alice felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her. "I want you to understand something," Miss Harrington began, her tone dripping with disdain. "You and your little friends may think you're standing up for something noble, but all you're doing is causing disruption. I won't allow it." Alice felt a surge of anger bubbling within her, but she kept her voice steady. "We're not causing disruption. We're advocating for a better learning environment. Everyone deserves respect." Miss Harrington's lips curled into a cruel smile. "You think you can speak to me like that because you have the principal as your mother. I assure you that won't protect you forever. You may find yourself in a position where your voice is no longer heard." With that, she turned on her heel and walked away, leaving Alice reeling from the threat. The weight of her words settled heavily in Alice's chest, but instead of succumbing to fear, she felt a spark of defiance. Returning to her friends, Alice felt a renewed sense of determination. "We need to go to the school board again," she said, her voice unwavering. "We can't let Miss Harrington intimidate us into silence. We have to show her that we will not be afraid." Mia nodded, her expression resolute. "I'm with you. We'll gather more support, share more stories. We have to make it clear that we won't back down." As they began organizing another meeting with the school board, Alice felt a sense of urgency and hope intertwining within her. This was no longer just about her. It was about creating a safe space for every student, ensuring that no one would endure what she had faced. The next week, as they prepared to present their case to the board once more, Alice felt a sense of unity that invigorated her. They had gathered even more signatures and testimonies, showcasing the widespread impact of Miss Harrington's behavior. On the day of the meeting, the energy in the room was electric. As Alice stood before the board again, flanked by her friends, she felt an overwhelming sense of purpose. "We're back," she said, her voice resonating with strength, "and we're here to continue the conversation about respect and dignity in our school." With each testimony shared, Alice felt the power of their collective voices rising, echoing the sentiments that had fueled their movement. This time, the board members were visibly moved, taking notes, and the reckoning. With each testimony shared, Alice felt the power of their collective voices rising, echoing the sentiments that had fueled their movement. This time, the board members were visibly moved, taking notes and nodding in agreement as the students spoke passionately about their experiences with Ms. Harrington. The room buzzed with anticipation as they awaited the board's response to their growing concerns. After several students had presented their stories, the chairperson of the board, a stern-looking woman named Ms. Patterson, cleared her throat and addressed the room. "Thank you all for coming forward today. It takes immense courage to share personal experiences, and we want you to know that your voices are being heard. We take these matters seriously, and we will investigate the claims regarding Ms. Harrington's behavior." A wave of relief swept through the room, and Alice felt the tension in her shoulders begin to dissipate. Yet, even amid the growing optimism, she couldn't shake the nagging fear that had been her companion throughout this journey. Would this be enough to enact real change? Would they finally hold Ms. Harrington accountable for her actions? As the meeting concluded, Alice and her friends felt a sense of accomplishment. They had taken their stand, united in their quest for respect, and for the first time, they could see a glimmer of hope. As they left the meeting room, they were greeted with applause from the students gathered outside, their support a powerful reminder that they were not alone in this fight. But as Alice returned to school the following week, she was met with a stark reality. Ms. Harrington had been notably absent, but the atmosphere in the classroom remained tense. The air was thick with uncertainty, and many students were on edge, unsure of how their teacher would react to the growing movement against her. During lunch, Alice sat with Mia and their friends, discussing the recent developments. "Do you think Ms. Harrington will come back?" Maya asked, her eyes filled with concern. "She has to come back," Alice replied, trying to sound confident. "But I'm worried about how she'll respond. It's one thing for the board to say they'll investigate. It's another for her to actually face consequences." Their conversation was interrupted when a group of students entered the cafeteria, their voices raised in excitement. "Did you hear? Ms. Harrington is back," one of them exclaimed, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. Alice's heart raced. She felt a mix of anxiety and anticipation at the thought of facing her again. "What do you think she'll say?" Mia whispered, her eyes darting around the cafeteria. "I don't know," Alice admitted, "but I'm not going to let her intimidate me. We've come too far." Later that day, as Alice walked into Ms. Harrington's classroom, she braced herself for the encounter. The teacher stood at her desk, a rigid posture that radiated authority. When Alice entered, Ms. Harrington looked up, her expression inscrutable. "Welcome back, Alice," she said, her voice steady but laced with something cold. "I hope you've been keeping up with your studies during my absence. I expect nothing less than excellence." Alice felt her heart pound as the words hung in the air, a challenge cloaked in sarcasm. "I have been keeping up," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "But I wanted to talk to you about the meeting we had with the school board." Ms. Harrington's eyes narrowed slightly, and Alice could feel the tension crackling between them. "There's nothing to discuss," Ms. Harrington said dismissively. "You've made your bed, and now you'll have to lie in it." Alice clenched her fists under her desk, fighting the urge to retaliate. She knew that rising to Miss Harrington's bait would only escalate the situation. Instead, she took a deep breath and chose to stand her ground. "I believe we can create a better learning environment together. I just want a chance to prove myself." "Prove yourself," Ms. Harrington sneered. "Let's see if you can manage to pass my class first. The way things are going, I'm not sure you'll make it through." With that, the bell rang and the class filed in. Alice felt a wave of dread wash over her. The familiar tension settled back into place, but this time it fueled her determination. She would not allow Miss Harrington's words to define her any longer. In the days that followed, Alice focused on her studies and the support of her friends. They continued to gather evidence and testimonies about Miss Harrington's treatment, determined to keep the momentum going. They even held informal meetings outside of school to discuss their next steps and plan a more formal presentation to the board about the need for a teacher-student support group. During one of these meetings, Maya proposed an idea that struck a chord with everyone. "What if we organized a school-wide forum?" she suggested. "We could invite students, teachers, and parents to come together and discuss the importance of respect and inclusivity. It would put pressure on the administration to address these issues head-on." The group erupted in enthusiastic agreement, and Alice felt a spark of hope igniting within her. "That's a great idea, Mia. If we can get everyone involved, it might lead to some real change." With newfound energy, they set to work planning the forum. They designed posters, spread the word through social media, and encouraged students from all grades to participate. As the date approached, the excitement in the air was palpable. This was their chance to amplify their message and ensure their concerns were taken seriously. However, as they put the finishing touches on their plans, the threat of retaliation from Miss Harrington lingered like a dark cloud. Alice often found herself second-guessing her decisions, wondering if she was inviting more trouble upon herself and her friends. On the day of the forum, Alice and her classmates gathered in the school auditorium, a mix of nerves and excitement coursing through the crowd. The auditorium buzzed with chatter as students filled the seats, eager to engage in this important conversation. Teachers, parents, and even some members of the school board were in attendance, ready to hear what the students had to say. Alice stood at the front of the auditorium, her heart racing as she looked out at the sea of faces. This was the culmination of their efforts, the moment they had worked so hard for. With her friends standing beside her, she took a deep breath and stepped forward to address the audience. "Welcome, everyone," Alice began, her voice echoing through the auditorium. "We're here today to talk about something that affects all of us: respect and inclusion in our school environment. We believe that every student deserves to feel safe, valued, and heard." As Alice continued, she shared stories from her classmates, recounting their experiences with Miss Harrington and the impact of her behavior on their learning. The energy in the room grew as students began to share their own stories, speaking openly about their struggles and the need for a supportive environment. The dialogue flowed organically, with parents and teachers chiming in with their thoughts and support. Alice felt a swell of pride as she witnessed her peers bravely expressing their feelings, their words resonating deeply with everyone present. The sense of unity was palpable, and she realized they were not just advocating for themselves. They were building a community. However, just as the forum reached its peak, the doors swung open, and in walked Miss Harrington, her presence commanding immediate attention. The room fell silent, tension hanging in the air as the students exchanged nervous glances. "What's going on here?" Miss Harrington demanded, her voice cutting through the atmosphere like a knife. "This is not an authorized assembly." Alice felt her heart race, the weight of fear creeping in once more. "We're having a discussion about respect and inclusivity, Ms. Harrington," she replied, her voice steady but laced with uncertainty. "We believe it's important for our school community." "Is that what you're calling this?" Miss Harrington scoffed, her eyes narrowing as she surveyed the crowd. This is nothing more than a gathering of disgruntled students trying to undermine my authority. You think you can just come here and air your grievances without any repercussions." Alice's heart sank, the tension in the room thickening as Miss Harrington's words hung heavily in the air. But this time, she wouldn't let fear dictate her response. She stepped forward, determination coursing through her veins. "We're not here to undermine anyone. We're here to advocate for a better learning environment. We believe in the power of respect, and we deserve to have our voices heard." As Alice spoke, she could feel the support of her classmates swelling behind her. "It's not just about you, Miss Harrington. It's about all of us. We want a school where everyone feels safe and valued, regardless of their background. That's what we're fighting for." Miss Harrington glared at Alice, a flicker of rage crossing her face. "You have no idea what you're doing," she spat. "You think this will end well for you." Alice felt a rush of adrenaline as she faced her teacher's fury. "I'm not afraid of you, Miss Harrington. And neither are my friends. We deserve respect, and we're going to make sure it happens." The crowd erupted into applause, their voices rising in support of Alice's words. The energy in the room shifted as students rallied around her, and Alice felt an overwhelming sense of empowerment. They were standing together, united against the bullying that had plagued them for too long. With a final glare, Miss Harrington turned on her heel and a new dawn. With a final glare, Miss Harrington turned on her heel and stormed out of the auditorium, leaving behind an electrifying silence. For a moment, it felt as though the air had been sucked out of the room. Then, almost as if a dam had burst, the students erupted into cheers, their voices echoing against the walls, a chorus of defiance against the fear that had silenced them for so long. Alice stood at the front, her heart racing. This was it. This was what she had been fighting for. She looked around at her classmates, their faces lit with determination and excitement. "We did it," she exclaimed, unable to contain her joy. "This is just the beginning." As the cheers continued, Mia rushed to Alice's side, her eyes sparkling with pride. "You were amazing. I can't believe how brave you were. We all stood up for what we believe in." The energy in the room was infectious, and Alice felt a surge of hope. But even amid the celebration, a small part of her couldn't shake the lingering doubt. What would happen next? Would the school board truly act on their words, or was this all just a fleeting moment of rebellion that would soon be forgotten? Over the next few days, the aftermath of the forum unfolded. The school buzzed with discussions about respect and inclusion, with students sharing their own stories and experiences. Alice and her friends found themselves at the center of a movement that seemed to gain momentum with every passing day. Their efforts had sparked a dialogue that rippled through the entire school community, igniting conversations among students, teachers, and parents alike. In the following week, Alice received an unexpected message from Principal Williams. "Alice, I would like to meet with you and your friends to discuss the developments from the forum and the steps we can take moving forward. I believe we have the opportunity to make real changes in our school." Excitement bubbled within Alice as she shared the news with Mia and the others. "This could be our chance to push for more structured changes," she said, her eyes bright with possibility. "We can't let this momentum die." When they met with Principal Williams, Alice felt a mix of nerves and anticipation. The principal welcomed them into her office, her expression serious yet encouraging. "I want to thank all of you for your bravery in standing up for what you believe in," she began, her voice steady. "The school board has decided to take immediate action regarding the concerns you raised about Miss Harrington. We will be conducting a thorough review of her teaching practices and addressing the need for professional development in inclusive education for all faculty members." Alice's heart swelled with gratitude. "Thank you, Principal Williams. This means so much to us," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "We also want to implement a student-led committee focused on fostering inclusivity and respect in our school." Principal Williams continued, "You all have shown incredible leadership, and I believe you would be the perfect candidates to help guide this initiative. Your voices matter, and we want you to be at the forefront of creating positive change." The room filled with excited chatter as Alice and her friends exchanged glances of disbelief. They had set out to make a difference, but this was beyond anything they had anticipated. "We would love to help," Alice replied, her heart racing at the thought of being part of such a meaningful initiative. The meeting concluded with a sense of purpose, and as Alice walked out with her friends, she felt a renewed sense of determination. This was their moment, and they were ready to seize it. In the weeks that followed, Alice and her friends worked tirelessly to establish the student-led committee. They organized meetings, gathered input from their peers, and formulated a plan to foster a more inclusive environment. The energy around the school was palpable, and students began to feel empowered to speak up about their experiences, sharing their stories in a way that had previously felt impossible. Alice found herself taking on more leadership responsibilities, embracing the role with a fierce passion. She organized workshops, inviting guest speakers to discuss the importance of diversity and inclusion. They created a safe space for students to share their stories, encouraging everyone to contribute their unique perspectives. The movement was gaining momentum, and Alice felt a sense of pride knowing they were making a tangible difference. However, the specter of Ms. Harrington lingered in the background, a reminder that the battle wasn't over yet. Although she had been placed on leave pending the investigation, Alice could feel the tension mounting each time she heard whispers about the teacher's potential return, which she tried to undermine the changes that had begun to take shape. One afternoon, as Alice prepared for a committee meeting, Mia approached her with a concerned expression. "I heard that Ms. Harrington might be coming back soon," she said, her voice low. "What do you think will happen when she does?" Alice sighed, the weight of the situation settling heavily on her shoulders. "I don't know, but we have to be ready. We can't let her derail what we've built. We need to stay united." As the day of Ms. Harrington's return drew near, Alice and her friends remained vigilant, strategizing about how to maintain their momentum. They discussed ways to support their classmates and ensure that everyone felt safe sharing their experiences. It was crucial that they built a strong foundation, one that couldn't be easily shaken by the reemergence of a formidable adversary. The day finally arrived, and as Alice stood at the front of the committee meeting, she could feel a mixture of excitement and anxiety coursing through her veins. "Thank you all for coming today," she began, her voice steady. "As you know, Ms. Harrington is back, and we need to make sure we continue to advocate for an inclusive environment. Our voices matter, and we have to support one another." The group nodded, their expressions resolute. "We're stronger together," Mia added. "If we work as a team, we can ensure that the changes we've started are upheld. We're not just fighting for ourselves, we're fighting for everyone." Alice felt a surge of hope as the discussion continued, their collective determination shining through. They brainstormed ideas for how to reinforce their message, emphasizing the importance of kindness, respect, and understanding. As the meeting came to a close, they decided to organize a school-wide event, a Respect Day, dedicated to celebrating diversity and fostering a sense of community. The preparations for Respect Day unfolded over the next few weeks. Students decorated the hallways with posters, sharing messages of positivity and inclusion. They planned activities, workshops, and presentations, eager to engage the entire school in a day of celebration and reflection. However, as the day approached, Alice sensed the growing tension in the air. She overheard snippets of conversations in the hallways, some students expressing support for the changes, while others remained skeptical, uncertain of the effectiveness of their movement. And then there were those who whispered about Ms. Harrington's return, fueling a sense of dread that hovered like a dark cloud over the excitement of the upcoming event. On the day of Respect Day, the school buzzed with energy. Students donned shirts emblazoned with messages of unity, and the atmosphere was vibrant with positivity. Alice felt her heart swell with pride as she walked through the halls, seeing her classmates engaged in meaningful conversations and activities. But as the day unfolded, the mood shifted when Ms. Harrington entered the school. Alice's heart sank as she caught sight of her, the once formidable teacher now bearing an air of resentment and defiance. It was clear that she had returned, not to embrace the changes, but to challenge them. During the assembly that afternoon, Alice stood at the podium, addressing the students about the importance of respect and inclusivity. "Today is about celebrating who we are and embracing our differences," she declared, her voice echoing through the auditorium. "We've worked hard to create a community where everyone feels valued, and together we can continue to build that foundation." As she spoke, Ms. Harrington stood at the back of the room, arms crossed tightly against her chest. The tension in the air was palpable, and Alice felt a chill run down her spine as she caught her teacher's gaze. After Alice finished her speech, Ms. Harrington stepped forward, interrupting the assembly with a steely glare. "While I commend the students for their enthusiasm, I must remind everyone that this is still a place of learning. Disruption and dissent will not be tolerated." The auditorium fell silent, and Alice's heart raced. She had anticipated Ms. Harrington's resistance, but the reality of the confrontation sent a wave of anxiety coursing through her. "This is not about disruption. It's about creating a better environment for all students," Alice replied, her voice steady despite her nerves. Ms. Harrington's expression hardened. "And what gives you the right to dictate how this school should be run? You may think you've started something here, but I assure you that I have the authority to put a stop to it." The crowd erupted in murmurs, and Alice felt her friends rallying around her, their support a shield against Ms. Harrington's hostility. "We won't back down," she declared, her heart pounding in her chest. "We are here to advocate for respect and dignity. This is our school, and we all deserve a voice." The energy in the room shifted as students stood up, one by one, echoing Alice's sentiment. "We support Alice," shouted one student, and the chorus of voices swelled, filling the auditorium with their collective resolve. As the chanting grew louder, Ms. Harrington's expression twisted with fury. "You may think you can intimidate me with your noise, but this will not end well for you. You're treading on dangerous ground." But Alice didn't falter. She stood firm, her friends surrounding her, their support unwavering. "We're not afraid of you, Ms. Harrington. We're not backing down." The confrontation marked a turning point, and Alice realized that the power of their movement lay not only in their individual stories but in their unity. Together, they had created a wave of change that was too strong to be ignored. In the days that followed, the school administration took note of the assembly's events. They began addressing the growing concerns regarding Ms. Harrington, and the students continued to rally around the movement for change. Respect Day became a symbol of resilience, igniting a newfound sense of community among students and faculty alike. As the weeks turned into months, Alice's efforts continued to bear fruit. The student-led committee was formalized, and initiatives aimed at fostering inclusivity were implemented throughout the school. The culture was shifting, and Alice felt a sense of fulfillment knowing they had made a tangible difference. Yet, even amidst the successes, Alice remained vigilant. The fear of Ms. Harrington's possible retaliation lingered like a shadow. However, she refused to let that fear dictate her actions. Instead, she channeled it into her advocacy, knowing that she had the support of her friends and the strength of their movement behind her. Finally, at the end of the school year, the administration announced that Ms. Harrington would not be returning to the school the following fall. The news brought a wave of relief, and Alice felt a weight lift from her shoulders. They had faced the storm and emerged stronger, united in their quest for a better learning environment. As Alice walked through the hallways one last time before summer break, she reflected on the journey they had undertaken. From the quiet girl who felt invisible to a leader who had helped ignite a movement, she had grown in ways she never imagined possible. With her friends by her side, she looked forward to the coming school year with hope and excitement. They had forged a path toward a brighter future, one where every student felt valued, respected, and empowered to share their unique stories. And as she stepped into the summer sun, Alice knew that this was only the beginning of their journey. The battle for respect and inclusivity might be ongoing, But she was ready to face it head-on, united with her friends and a community that had finally found its voice. Together, we'll continue to make a difference, Alice whispered to herself, her heart full of hope for what lay ahead. The future was bright, and she was determined to embrace every moment of it.